Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for this fantastic conference. I think it's unprecedented in the world to have a conference where you invite everybody and also showcase to the world your challenges and vulnerabilities. So, Congressman, thank you for being here. We start over 100 years ago with Cape Horn, where the Dutch passed and discovered this part of the world. This started a Dutch-Chilean collaboration, although at that time we didn't know it was going to be so needed and so necessary. Now, I'm a special envoy, and I just want to quote the secretary of the SIAM. I don't know if you know the SIAM, but he actually said, never trust a bureaucrat. I don't know what you want to take for granted, but the bureaucrat connected to politics can never be insured to science, academia, and culture. I don't think that's the right approach. I think bridging the gap between science, between academia and government and politics, between businesses and community is critical for the way forward. We have a choice, but then we have to deliver on that promise. What future will we choose? Aquatic ecosystem collapse or more healthy rivers? Unprecedented forest loss or more forest, more habitat? High infrastructure costs or more affordable water supply? A climate burden or more green growth? Rising water risks or more security, water security for all? A growing agriculture footprint or more food security? Real vulnerable communities or more health and more well-being? And everything starts with water. 3 references before I start on the water. Alexander von Humboldt, perhaps you've forgotten him, don't. Read the book by Alexander Wolff. It's an easy read, you can read it on a plane. It's for some of you from academia, perhaps it's a 10-minute read. From the rest of the world, perhaps a flight. It's very informative, and it will tell you the story of a scientist that stood in the center of society. He understood the complexity of the environment, the ecology, in all its dimension and the interdependencies. He understood economy and man's behavior, and he understood politics and the connection between all 3. And I haven't found a von Humboldt in these times, but I'm sure there are junior or senior von Humboldts in this Congress we need to deal and solve with the problems of the future. Second, we need change, but change does not come easy. And the only way we can bring change is we include everyone. And therefore this conference is such a thing to applaud because it includes everyone. It's on the web, it's on the TV, you can all come. They invited the world to diagnose and work with Chile on issues of the future. It is true, changing the world includes everyone. And think about the role of the government. Matsukato wrote a book on the entrepreneurial state. I want to add a layer. She focused on the innovation part and the business part. Government actually really takes care of. But there's a baseline government needs to take care of, and that baseline is critical for a sustainable world. Water. It all starts with water. German flood defenses, inspected by Angela Merkel. She looks a little grumpy. I would be grumpy if it would be my flood defenses. In another country in Europe, the UK, Cameron already left, but he has his boots in the water after again a flooding. The UK is not fit for the future. And a little closer, you see the bald guy in the water? It's not me. It's a man that is inspecting the sewage system. His task was to find the leak. Well, I can tell you, there is no leak in that sewage system. It's the ocean coming up almost every week now in the streets of Miami. But water is not only about too much, it's also about too little, and the mismanagement or the management of water in the wrong hands and in the wrong way. At the core of the Syrian conflict was a lack of water, drought for a long time. People fled to the city that increased the opportunity for that conflict. That lack of water in the rural areas was mismanagement. Water became a weapon of mass destruction in the hands of the wrong person. This is the Colorado River, a river that dried up. It hasn't touched the Gulf of California in the last 60 plus years. Not because of climate change, although climate change now is increasing the burden, again, because of mismanagement. And in my home country, this is a swan. She built her nest on garbage. She actually raised her babies on this nest of garbage, but the image became part of the campaign to clean our canals, to clean our water. And clean water is a necessity. 5,000 people die every day because of health issues, and half of Africa does not have access to clean drinking water, and this is what it looks like. And in small island states all across the world, climate change and sea level rise is impacting the physical habitat of the people. This is an older picture. Her home is gone. We need an approach that really is transformative. But how much water are we talking about? Well, this is all the water there is in the world. The big round bulb, most of the times I jump at it to point it out, but there are 3 blue spheres. The big one is all the water in the world. The middle one, the size of the Netherlands, is all the water we can use for energy, for food, agriculture, and urbanization. It's not a lot. We have to treat it carefully. Climate change is like the magnifying glass. It brings us water and hits us hard. Too much water with surges and sea level rise, or too little water with droughts in our environment. Climate change increases the impact of our water crisis. And already 90% of all disasters are water-related, impacting 2 billion people in the next decades with too much water, and almost another 2 billion in the decades after for too little water. Adding that up, that's 40% of the world's population. And the costs rise. 15% of our GDPs are impacted by those crises. Now, if we look at the natural water system, our aquifers, we take all the water out. Our industry, mankind, energy, half of those aquifers are past their tipping point. Past their tipping point means that a natural recovery is impossible. So there is a business case. Professor Hallekatte showed that the assets at risk in 2050, when it comes to water, add up to the trillions, and Miami, that same Miami where the water boils up, leads the list with $278 billion at risk. The Netherlands is on the list too, so we are in danger with our assets. But what strikes me with this picture is if you look at Africa, there are no big red dots in Africa. Why? Because there is not enough assets at risk. But this is 2050. Africa will be doubled in population. So if money and finance are the only drivers for change, the poor and vulnerable of the world will lose out. Not for nothing, the World Economic Forum put water as the #1 global risk for the next decade. And this is the world when you look at water, and red is not a good color. But it's an urban world. A world where we in cities try to solve our issues in a comprehensive way. Cities that are at the forefront of risk, that are at waterfronts, on riverines and on our coastline. Risky investment with opportunities for change. If you add the layer of conflict and geopolitical risks, then it becomes even more complex. Water is at the heart of so many conflicts because it doesn't care about borders. It doesn't care about boundaries. If I build a dam, my neighbors actually are impacted. And I can build a dam even on purpose or take the water away. The G7 presented a report 2 years ago, A New Climate for Peace, and it put water at the core of conflict, at the start of conflict. So water is an issue, a challenge, a big risk. World Economic Forum shows that impact and that frequency increases over time. So if you look at this list on the left side of the slide, that's like your nightmare slide. It tells you that tomorrow is always worse. That yesterday, even if it was bad yesterday, tomorrow is worse. More storms, more surges, more risks. So this is like doom and gloom. This is the bad side. But I'm an optimistic guy. If you look at the right side, it tells you that all these risks are interdependent and interrelated. And that is where the solutions come. If we work together, collectively and collaboratively and connect the dots in origin, mitigation, and impact, adaptation, we can deal with water by turning it from risk into asset. We are at a turning point. Tomorrow is worse if we add things up. Now, to make it a little more complex, I want to play a game with you, or at least imagine that you were little. Do you remember this? Or did you give it to your kids or your grandchildren, or are you still playing with it? That's okay. They give it to engineers to test if they're really good. If they get the forms in within 10 seconds, they're engineers. If they play with it the whole day without ever getting them in, they study literature or something. This is the thing. But this is like the world now. The cube is our rules and regulations. It's our system. And the forms are the solutions we present. And they fit. But these forms don't work with the challenges ahead. If we want to deliver on the promise of the SDGs, if we want to deliver on the promise of the climate agreement, those solutions that fit in the structures of today will never bring the change that is needed. We need new solutions outside of the system to change the world in the next 5 years. The climate agreement said we want to work on a 2-degree, 1.5, but that was only for the small island states, a 2-degree world. If we want to get that change, the curves have to change in the next 5 years. If those curves don't change, we'll never make it. We have to find new solutions, but we have no clue. There is no business case for the poor. We have no time to waste. We're sometimes in this lock-in of a situation, and there's a disconnect of the past and the future. So let's bridge the gap. An approach that meant an engineering approach with a sociology approach, where Robert Moses, the big bully engineer of New York, married Jane Jacobs. Let's write that story. The community worker. They got kids. You might be their kids. They think and they will connect heart and mind. A transformative approach that is long-term, but at the same time brings short-term innovative projects. It's inclusive, and it includes everyone, and that means institution and the non-institutional world, businesses, government, science, academia, and NGOs. It's transparent and accountable and works in public-private, and it builds capacity with all stakeholders. If we want to do this innovative, we need to use design or cultural assets and a process that is innovative, that includes all to really reach for that future. So a design approach, why? Design is able to connect the dots, both from origin and from impact. Design can solve the technical aspect of all issues at stake, environmental, economic, social. At the same time, design looks across scales. It looks across from city to region to international. It looks across times. It looks back and forward, and it looks across sectors and connects the dots. But design can do something more, and this is what von Humboldt's talk was about. Design can connect with the political, with the ambition to help change the world. We need a transformative approach, and for that you need a safe place. A place where it's not about negotiation, but really about inspiration and collaboration. You need a process that escapes the cube, a process outside of the institutional barriers we find ourselves in, a detour. You need to look back and learn from the past and all its failures and challenges, but we also need to look ahead in scenarios that give us a pathway forward. We need to use design and an innovative process of collaboration and forget about heroes or superheroes. Everyone's an actor in such an approach, and everyone is as important. The talent of the world should meet the talent of the regions at risk and work together on solutions to deal with these challenges. Collaboration, it started in the Netherlands. In 1122, we institutionalized our water democracy to build on that asset and deliver a collaboration and a transparent way of governing water. And we need inclusive leadership. The Netherlands is like an inspiration, a test bed for such an opportunity. Our delta is sustainable, and we tested by fault, default, and success ways forward. We want to bring that asset, that experience, and excellence to the world. We don't want to sit on it. And our collaboration with Chile, government, businesses, academia, already is delivering some solutions in the institutional, in projects, and inspirations. I work as an envoy in a lot of places where water is at the forefront of risk, where it's causing death and despair. And with this inclusive approach, we try to bring hope and solutions. We work with everyone, no one included. We started a Delta Coalition where countries got together around these issues of deltas, countries where we turned the deltas from a place of despair to a hotspot of opportunities. Deltas in countries like Vietnam and Myanmar and Bangladesh and Indonesia, but also Egypt, France, the Netherlands, and Peru. We make a better narrative, define a clear agenda, use the coalition as a broker to escape the locking we find ourselves in, reinvent finance, make projects, and start implement them now. With the UN and the World Bank, we created the high-level panel on water to raise water to the highest level of the global agenda. Because before you know it, it's forgotten. And it's a perspective of despair, but in the end, the biggest opportunity to deal with those risks. 11 presidents and prime ministers joined forces to deal with this water, and they will deliver at the World Water Forum in Brazil in 2018. And Chile is working with its Water Week in February to set the agenda. An action plan built on the pillars of data, valuing water, and governance, where resilient economies, access to water, sustainable cities, environment and water, infrastructure, builds catalyzing change. Now what's next? Next is to start. We have to start with projects. Projects that come from opportunity places. And when is a place an opportunity? When it mixes the hotspots of challenges with the people that want to take them. Hope comes from ambition. And it's those places where challenges and people come together we work on. In the Netherlands, in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, in Egypt, in Myanmar, in Mozambique, in Poland, in Vietnam, in Colombia, in New York, and also in Chile. Chile is a country where the whole world comes together. It's so big, it has every aspect of environment, economy, and urbanization. The Chile-Dutch water collaboration consists of 3 pillars. A dialogue to raise it to the top, but also invest in research and a better narrative and understanding. An institute to increase the capacity, transparency, and governance, and decrease its fragmentation, and start testing with water pilots now to learn faster, make mistakes, and relearn again. We can bridge the gap if we start today and use water as a global approach. Not so much to change your plan, but to change your culture. But in the end, it's not so much a future for us, it's the future for them. And Chile and the Netherlands can help bring that. Thank you.